drum name is Dr. K. K. And the reason I use that doctor is because I want to share with everybody, particularly my students who are normally age 18, that you can play the drums and be a doctor. That you, being a doctor, can help you be anything. So you need high levels of education. You need strength of learning what is necessary in order to become successful in life. And that is a lesson that I just transmit over and over every time you say my drumming name, Dr. K. Now, I would like to introduce the other group. Laverne Mitchell. Laverne, would you like to say anything? Laverne's name is Dancer. Dancer. Now, this name comes from the fact that whenever she would arrive a little bit late, and we'd still be drumming, she'd just come in dancing. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
Our third drummer is Reese.
Hello.
Now, Reese Williams doesn't have a drumming name yet. This is something into which you evolve, that is, with your drumming name. And we understand that we're into a place that's going to be dealing with restorative justice. Is that right?
Yes.
What we are about the business of doing is bringing restorative justice to where? Say it.
Community.
Where?
Covington.
Covington. Yeah. Is that not right? That you
Yes.
Yeah, okay, yeah, just say it, yeah. It's comfortable. And what we want to do for you is to play two pieces out of Africa. And the first piece we're going to play soon, and we're going to be talking about something kind of extraordinary. And that's the title of this piece. It's called Fanga. Does anybody know the name Fanga? Never heard it. And you've probably never heard the song. But this is also kind of like you're looking for things to make restorative justice effective. Is that not correct?
Right.
And those are things that you don't know now, right? Right? And you're going to look vigorously. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I hope that you find something. Because in this song, Fanga, you may know a little bit about music. It goes like this. We are playing a 4/4 rhythm. 4/4 rhythm means 4 notes per measure. And we find that our 4th note in the second measure is missing. This thing is missing. It isn't there. It's blank notes. Now, do you think you'll be looking for blank notes when you go throughout, wherever you go looking for? And I hope you find many of those blank notes, because, after all, that's what makes music, the fun things in life. And does anybody have any questions at this point? No questions? I'm going to ask one more question then for me. As I understand it, the rest of this is about dealing with, the rest of this convention is about dealing with the elements of restorative justice. Is that correct?
Yes.
And how many workshops are you going to be doing today in order to find out things that you need to know about restorative justice?
We have 3 breakout sessions and 1 keynote speaker in the morning and a keynote speaker in the afternoon.
Okay.
So 5.
5. And I'm going to introduce you. And I'll go back to the song for 1 minute because it has a lot of history. It turns out that there is a dancer who has a PhD in dance. And she earned that PhD not by writing a dissertation. She earned it by dancing. Can you imagine? And one of the very first things that she learned was funga. Her name is Pearl Prince. You're not going to hear Pearl, but you're going to hear funga, and I'd like to start now. Are you ready?
Yes.
You guys ready? We are anticipating that this music will lend to your search efforts a bit of energy. I'm going to start playing, and Reese and Dancer will begin playing. The song is Pamela.
I want to acknowledge some people who made this, and this facilities and institutions who made this possible today. First, we have to please give a round of applause for Gateway Community. They provided this facility, they provided funding, they provided people power, they laid out and printed our program. We have a new understanding of the community in Gateway and community. Thank you. Also, we have received funding from the SC Ministry Foundation, from the Sisters of Charity, and that was one of the reasons we were able to make this free for people to come to. Kenton County Public Library, your orange bags, obviously you would see when you pick those up, but they also helped us in terms of some layout, wrapping, printing of posters, so a shout out to them. We always have to acknowledge the Center for Great Neighborhoods. We would not be here without them as an agency. We have many ambassadors from Gateway today who gave up a day of their spring break to come here. I'm delighted that it's not a sunny 80-degree day for them. Many of them have yellow dots. They know the place, they know the facility. But to welcome us to Gateway, we have Terry von Handorf. I was going to say von Handorf. And Terry is a provost from Gateway. She's had a successful career in education that's included adult education, assistant provost. Her particular focus is developmental education. And she has agreed to take the morning to say hello to us. Terry.
Well, good morning, everyone. As I was introduced, My name is Terry Von Handorf, and I am the provost here at Gateway. I've had the opportunity, I think, to meet each of you one-on-one. So again, I extend my thanks for you being here, and we are so thrilled that you're able to share our wonderful space down here in Covington. How many of you have been to Gateway before? Okay, so we have some people that this is your very first encounter with Gateway. Well, a very hearty welcome to you. This is one of 3 of our campuses. We have one at Boone and also one at Edgewood. And criminal justice is one of our 30 academic programs. And why I highlight that is because through that you can see that Gateway has the same mission as your organization. We want to improve lives and strengthen our communities. Gateway is committed to that, and we are always proud to be part of the solution. So on behalf of Gateway, and Dr. Figueroa, our president, sends his very warm welcome to all of you, but he is out of town. So thank you so much for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful conference. And I also want to shout out to Amy Carino, who I know has put out many You are welcome anytime at Gateway, and if there's anything we can do for any of you or your organizations, please do not hesitate to reach out to us.
She's a storyteller, and I'm sure there'll be some stories in part of what she says this morning or in her policy panel session. She has an incredibly diverse background in a lot of different areas related to justice and social justice. She has been a local police officer, a Kentucky State police officer. She has worked with the Kentucky Innocence Project. She was an investigator who helped to get, I think, 8 people exonerated who had been falsely convicted. She continues now to try to spread the concept of restorative principles throughout Kentucky, and we'd like to welcome her.
Thank you very much, Susie, for having me here. It's really great to be with all of you, and I'm so glad that you're here with us. And I'm so glad that you're going to spend your day learning and sharing stories and exchanging, information with one another about how situations and circumstances has impacted your life. And we're going to learn a lot together today. We're going to have some fun together today. And if you've never been to a restorative practice or restorative justice conference, anybody ever been to one? Anybody in the room ever been to another restorative justice conference in their life? All right, Warren, Sister Jan. Okay. And if you haven't, they're always a little different, right? They're just a little different than your normal conference. Always one of the reasons that, we had Dr. Foster and company doing, having the drumming ceremony is that restorative justice and restorative practice is about ceremony. It's been a long tradition held that, convening together, that it is the signaling that there's an important event that's going to happen with the community. It's one of the reasons that, that beginning of ceremony takes place to raise the energy, to change the energy, so that people know that we're going to come together as one in unity to resolve something, to be able to address a problem of some sort, or just to come together in community and share with one another. So it is a great privilege to be with you today. And I want to share some remarks with you, and I've got a film that I want to show a little bit and share. And as you know today from your schedule and from the invitation, we are going to talk about how that trauma and restorative justice have an intersection together. And this morning I'm going to talk to you a little bit about historical trauma and how it impacts communities and how it can impact, local communities, local groups within schools and institutions, within criminal justice, within all kinds of different settings. Personally, we may have experienced personal trauma in our lives or someone in our family. If we live long enough, things happen, right? And we have circumstances and events that come up. And we really have experiences that sometimes really change our lives, have the ability to change our lives and to impact us in very deep and deep ways. And without those types of traumas being healed, or to taking steps for those being healed, we have no ways of recourse for that. You know, we either take all of that up inside of us and keep it, or we share it perhaps with just a few, but ultimately it changes and shape-shifts our lives a little, whether we recognize that or we don't. And so today we're going to explore, you know, trauma and how that restorative practice and restorative justice can provide ways of healing for those situations. So I'll get started, I guess, formally. Is that, again, thank you so much, and I'm so pleased to be with you today. Thanks to the Gateway Community Foundation, the Gateway Community and Technical College, to Dr. Terry Vonderhoff, Amy Carino, Eric Marr, Pam Mullins, Susie Bookster for inviting me to speak, you know, to you this morning and to share some remarks. It really is a great honor. Community Restorative Justice-Covington has prepared this great day, as I said, for you. And I've told you that it's about storytelling and that it comes from deep places about our experiences and about reflections that we have. Today we'll explore together how traumatic events, situations, encounters affect us long-term and impact our future. How we heal the current and historical wounds of traumatic events in legitimate ways. What barriers are created when we experience trauma that prevent us from fully participating at work or school, with family, with friends, and with the broader community. For me, I've experienced some inequality. I imagine most of you in this room at one time in your life have experienced one or more or many inequalities and unjust circumstances earlier in your lives. It came for me from being first at things. I've seemed to have this life of being first at certain things. And it began a long time ago, when I was a little girl. And I want to share with you kind of just 3 little stories about how being first, you know, created these unusual circumstances in my life that in some ways were wonderful, great circumstances of growing, but at the same time, it was my first experiences of understanding what inequality means and what being treated maybe a little unjustly means, or not being accepted fully for who you are. And the first one is I want to talk about, I'm an athlete. I'm an old athlete. I don't look as good as I used to at one time in my life. However, in high school many years ago, I was a part of the girls' basketball team. I come from a little town in Ashland, Kentucky. Anybody know where that's at? Okay. We call that Little Pittsburgh for all us little Ashlanders that live there. It's a little Pittsburgh. We had all the coal plants and the steel mills, and I actually worked in a steel mill when I was 16 years old, and that's how I got extra money all 3 summers to go to college. And it was the most unique experience I ever had, a whole lot of fun actually. And I was with all of my friends from high school and from people in the community, and we had a great time. But anyway, I was from this small community, and I was part of the first basketball team that Boyd County High School, a county high school that had many, lots and lots of students, ever had. We lived in a little community called Canonsburg, but it was the first basketball team that they had ever had at our high school. And it was, that was, you know, it was exciting, right? And they actually came around to you and says, I think you could play basketball. Do you want to? And, you know, and so they gathered us up, and we had this small team of about, I think, 11 players that were a part of it. Well, that was really, really exciting, but of course, it was brand new. It was a new idea, right? Title IX, this is in 19, I'm going to tell my age, 1978.
Was this a women's basketball team,
Oh.
mixed team?
Girls basketball.
Girls basketball.
All girls, brand new. Title IX, who remembers the early days of Title IX? Okay, wonderful. We know that those are barriers, right, that were opened up for women so that sports could be offered to girls as much as boys in high school athletics. And we were a part of that very first team. Pam Traylor was our coach. And as excited as we were about it, we did face some weird things that went on, that people didn't think we should be there, which I had no clue. I was just psyched that I was getting to play a sport that I love. I was going to get to do it with my friends, and we actually had a full schedule of games that we were going to play other high schools. And it was quite exciting, time. But here's one of the things that with my first experience with bumping up against inequality and understanding as a young girl, in 1970, I guess that was 1974, was the first team that we had there. And one day we were all suited up in our gym clothes and we're getting ready to go to practice, and we go to the gym and there's chains on the door. All of the doors of the gym were chained. And we're like, what? What's going on? And we couldn't get in, and my coach was like, what's going on? And so anyway, they had, and the boys, no offense to you guys, it's not about you. The guys were inside practicing, but it was our practice time. And we didn't understand why in the world were we not inside that gym. This is our time. Hey, come on, let us in. Not so much. Well, for a couple weeks, we had to practice late. We had to wait for the guys to leave, and we waited. And we did. My coach and everybody, they called or, got in touch with their parents, and we didn't get home until like 8:30 or 9 at night because we had to practice late every day. And so my coach was furious, and she was very furious about it. And ultimately, it took time, but we did gain access. I didn't know that people felt that way about it, that they didn't think we belonged there, that we shouldn't really have a team, and that we really didn't fit in, and that we bumped up against this barrier of discrimination. And eventually, it did get better, but it really did take 2 or 3 years for that whole circumstance to shift, and for people to start coming to our games. And ultimately, we became a really great team. And people did come to our games, and it really did start out, and today, of course, they have a high school. In fact, they're in the girls' state tournament today. Last week, I attended this Miss Kentucky basketball banquet, and I met a girl from Boyd County High School who was Miss Kentucky basketball. And so it felt full circle for me. It was really a great celebration in my spirit about how wonderful it was to stand there with the girl. And I told her that we were the first team ever. And she was floored that she met someone that was part of that first team. The second time that I ever really experienced, bumping up against something that was discriminatory was that, I told you that I was first in a lot of things. And the first place I ever became a police officer was in South Carolina. And it was, I was not a child that knew exactly what they wanted to do in high school. It took me a minute. And I still grow and I still evolve, I think, as the person I am today. But in the beginning, I started out I went to South Carolina basically because I broke up with someone, and it was the end of a whole, relationship, and I was footloose and fancy free, and I had a dear friend there, right? And they lived, near the coast, and I was like, this will work. This is great. So I end up in South Carolina. I enjoy my time there. I had, a really good connection. Started building connections, relationships with people there, and then I'm like, I want to stay. I think I want to stay. I'm going to try to put some roots down and see where this goes. Well, I had some background a bit. I worked with the Federal Job Corps Center. Anybody ever familiar with the Federal Job Corps Centers and the work that they do? Well, really early on, I worked in the residential section of that organization, and it gave me a little background with dealing with youth. And so many trouble that came from all over the United States, and ended up actually in the mountain town of Prestonsburg, Kentucky, at the Carl D. Perkins Job Corps Center. Well, anyway, at the So it gave me some background enough to where I thought, I think I'll apply for this job because the ad said in the paper, women welcome. I thought, okay, that's a clue. You know, that'll work for me. And so I applied. And, you know, to some degree, to my surprise, I got called for an interview. And then I got called for a couple more interviews. And then eventually, then I was called and I was told, we want to offer you the job. Please come in and see the chief. Okay? And so I go in and I sit down at the desk, and he's sitting across from me, and you know, he's kind of a dry personality. He's not exactly warm and fuzzy. You know, he's kind of this dry, kind of stern fellow, slightly grumpy. And I sit down across the desk from him, and I'm really young. I'm like 24, 23 years old, as I remember at the time. I felt really young at the time. And I sit down across the desk from him, and he looks at me, and he says, you know, Miss Queen, we've never had a woman at this police department. We've never had anyone, you know, a woman here. I wouldn't have one today because I'm going to tell you straight up, I don't believe it. I don't believe in women being in police. I think it's a male's job. I think that you're going to come across things you can't handle. But the EEOC is on my table. And, you know, the community seems to want women in policing. And he had been there at that time about 25 years. He'd probably been there a little longer. And I just looked at him and I thought, oh my gosh. I didn't know what to say. I was dumbfounded, really. I just didn't know what to say. And he said, you know, I don't believe in this. I don't think it's the right thing to do. I think that it's not going to work out. But if you want this job, and then he opens the desk, and he gets the gun out, and he gets the badge out, and he slides it across the table to me, and he says, you're hired. And I was like, I don't know. Here, take him back. I'm not sure if I want this. You know, this may not be fun for me. This could go all shades of wrong, right? So anyway, I did take the job because I needed money and I needed to make a living and I needed to be stable so my parents would think that I wasn't, you know, falling off planet Earth. And I did take the job, and I ended up with a wonderful sergeant named Ron Thompson. And I still to this day, I haven't kept up with him exactly, but in my heart and in his, I think, we both had a mission together. And we had this bond together that he knew that he had to take this young gal who didn't know anything about policing very much or anything, and he had to mold me into somebody that could fit into the department that had never, he was a training officer. And he was wonderful. He was a wonderful man. He made sure that I went to every choir practice. Now, y'all probably don't know what that is, but and what that means, he told me, was that's when all of us police officers get together and cry the blues. We sing the blues. And so they called it choir practice. And that was one of their ways of connecting together, you know. But he made sure that I made it to every birthday party or whatever it was. He made a way for me. And I never forgot that it was because of Ron Thompson that I stayed in law enforcement. And my last story to share with you, that was not I should say, that was the next time I bumped up against discrimination. Other officers there didn't know what to think of me, you know, and I, you know, however, I think for the most part it worked out very well. There were some few hard heads that I had to navigate over time. And I have to say, in the back of my mind, it always loomed in the back of my mind, are they going to be there if I get in trouble? What's going to happen to you, Diana, when you pull that car over or you have to take that person in, you know, to jail that is really drunk or really disorderly and you really do need help? You know, or are you going to have another unit there, you know, sitting behind you? You know, what's going to happen? And I thought of that, but see, I was naive. I was 23, right? You know, I was like, it will work. It will be okay, it will work. So as difficult as some of those things were and scary as those things were, that connection with law enforcement certainly, you know, connected with me. And the last thing I want to tell you really quickly, how am I doing, Susie, on time?
I'm not tracking.
Oh, okay, you're not tracking. Okay. Is that the last story that I want to share with you before, and we're going to watch a little bit of a film, is one with the Kentucky State Police. You know, during the time that I was a police officer in South Carolina, my mom became ill with cancer. And I returned home, and as fortune would have it, I was contacted by a friend of mine who said, Diana, the Kentucky State Police wants women. I thought, oh boy, I've heard this before. Okay, they do. And they want women, they want female troopers in there. And this is back in maybe 1983, you know, 80, 85. Forgive me, I probably don't remember exactly the dates. But they want to, they're recruiting women for the Kentucky State Police, and we'd like for, you know, we think you would be a great candidate for that. And I was still in South Carolina, but I was trying to figure out, you know, how am I going to handle all this, you know. And so I come back, and I do eventually get into the Kentucky State Police. And I was one of the first women that actually was ever in the Kentucky State Police. And today they still don't have a lot of women, you know, in that field. And but however, I think I was the 11th woman that was ever, you know, with the organization. And when we went through the academy, I was the I had one other female with me, and in the academy. But unfortunately, she made some poor decisions on what they call a computer simulated shooting, you know, scenarios that you have to do. And she regrettably didn't make it through that, so that left me alone. We started out with 56 people, 2 females and 54 males, and we ended up with 37 of us who graduated, and I was the only one. And again, and you talking about something, it was brand new, which was the relationship. You know, that was another moment, pivotal moment of when I bumped up against the ceiling of something where I really wasn't all that well. You know, I mostly was there. I feel like that, one, I did have the qualifications to be there at that point, but additionally, right, they're trying to introduce something new into their organization. And I ended up in Eastern Kentucky. And I ended up in the mountains of Eastern Kentucky. And up in the area of Pikeville, Martin County, and Hazard, and Harlan, and all of that were what we call the deep mountains of Eastern Kentucky. And the community, it was new for them too. It was new for me, new for them, new for the other troopers. They had hardly ever had a woman there. And certainly, I don't think I have to even tell you what an adjustment everyone had to make. And some of the stories that I have from there, as with all of these stories I'm telling you, have, you know, also have the element of hurt and of anger and of not understanding certain things and having relationships with people not go the way that you might just expect that normal relationships should go. And those things impressioned me, you know, deeply about, you know, how I feel about what happens with other people when they experience, you know, injustice. What happens with, you know, when people are marginalized and are not, you know, part of the mainstream. How does that impact you on a daily basis? And I knew what that felt like in a real personal way. So you know, so up in the mountains of Eastern Kentucky, my story there, other than the fact that I did have some discrimination going on, not only there, but with the city police department, and also with, you know, like I told you, with the Title IX. But in Eastern Kentucky, we had one of my eye-opening experiences was that I was standing, I was road checking one day. Does everybody know what road checking is? Or, you know, you stand as a police officer in the country when you work rural policing. You'll get a road that you identify with in a community, and you'll stop cars and check them for driver's license. And, you know, and it's both a positive contact, it really can be, you know, that's what it's meant to do 2 things, to catch drunk drivers, and then the other part is a positive contact. And so one day, here I was, Sunday afternoon. I always loved to do it on a Sunday afternoon. It was nice, you know. It's a great way for me to get to know people in the community. And I was standing there, and here comes this old truck, you know, like you might imagine. An older man in this red truck drives up. And I had my hat on, right? Kentucky State Police, the big hat, and you know, and my uniform and everything, and I have a vest on, and the gentleman pulls up, and he said, I say, sir, hi, how are you today? You see your driver's license? And so he gets his driver's license out, takes him a few minutes, and he hands him to me, and I'm looking at him, and he says, hey, I want to ask you something. I said, okay, what do you want to ask? He said, well, they tell me, he said, my neighbor told me this. He said, they tell me that there are women in the state police. Is that true? And I say, yes, it is true. And I'm like, okay. And then I lean in there a little bit and I say, I'm one of them. And so that was my relationship to, you know, those were some of my early experiences of how, you know, of how that community, right? Never thought that a woman was going to be in that. How are they going to relate to that? What did that really mean for them, and changes about how they believe and think, and what shifts do we have to make in our thinking to accommodate all of this, right? Okay, so at each of these crossroads, both good and new challenges, but also lots of landmines, as I was kind of telling, about inherent bias and discrimination. Those encounters rooted me in the work that I've loved for the past 30 years and have developed my relationship to justice. We all develop this relationship to justice. We have one. We don't know, you know, we have to, it's our personal thing that we have. And that rooted me and stretched my limbs about our thoughts about discrimination and my personal journey, but also the journey of others like you, like my clients that I had through the years, families that I talked with, and those we freed from prison. Today, here in the audience, you have your stories that developed your relationship with justice. We learn through those personal experiences and through encounters with government, with education, with legal systems, or as participants of those systems about our relationships to justice. Through those day-to-day encounters that we have, be they good or bad, or disappointing or enlightening. We learn through those family stories or by witnessing acts of equality of others. We root ourselves again into even deeper places to our relationship with justice. We know as a collective humanity that when we closely witness misdeeds, violence, scandals, indecencies to our fellow citizens, that we suffer not only fools, but also are impacted like seeds sown in the souls of those events. And so sometimes, though, it's not the big things in our lives that are transformative. It's a collective of small things. A walk to school, a ride on a bus, a traffic ticket, a sporting event, a Sunday in church, or an awakening about someone you love. We think about those transformative moments, and some do fade from distant memory, but sometimes they stay forever. As we'll see, I'm going to now show you this following film, and this film is from the Civil Rights and Restorative Justice Project at Northeastern University School of Law in Boston, Massachusetts. The project is under the direction of Margaret Burnham. I got the pleasure of hearing her speak, and if you've not heard her speak, she is quite amazing. So this film, I want to get the film loaded up here, and let's take a look. Our communities have these stories. This is a great demonstration project that actually, and it shows you how historical trauma impacts us individually, it impacts us as neighbors, it impacts us in our neighborhoods as friends, how we come together, how we don't come together. It impacts it on a larger scale And then that scale even goes larger, as we think about, trauma that is connected to historical events of discrimination and horrible atrocities that have occurred for many years, in the United States. And we have to think about, the gift of restorative justice is that it provides the intersection of how do we go forward and heal from these traumas. Brian Stevenson is a human rights and death penalty lawyer. Many of you all may be familiar with him. He's quite amazing. He's been before the United States Supreme Court several times, 6 times, I think, that he has. And he talks about if you can't tell the truth, if you can't start with the real story and tell the truth, then how do we ever get to healing? How do we ever get past these traumatic events where we can have spaces to convene, where we can have these difficult conversations? How can that ever really happen? And that's what must happen so that communities have a way to go forward. In the criminal justice system, we have a way of looking at things about what happened, right? What happened in this event? And we have a way of leaving it at the door, or at the courthouse, or at the plea bargain, or whatever is happening. We have a way of leaving some things there. In the Navajo tradition, they don't look at things at looking in the past and looking at leaving it there. We're looking into the future. What future do we see for this circumstance, this situation, these individuals that are involved with this? What is the way forward from this? And it is not by not having difficult conversations. It is not by being afraid of being able to come together to have those conversations about trauma and traumatic events that all of us have probably experienced in small ways, in collective ways, or huge traumatic events like this. Do we agree? Do you think for the families, of John Earl Reese, that until this project brought this to light, and people had an opportunity to have those conversations, that, things really weren't transformed? But through those conversations, and through difficult conversations, people talked about the truth of it, the real of it, the what it is of it. The people had conversations directly and had those meaningful dialogues. They changed the narrative of their experience with justice. They changed the narrative of how they move forward. And that's what the community, you as a community, we all in our communities, in our neighborhoods, have an opportunity to change those narratives. You do not need permission from anyone to do that. You have to choose different ways to connect. Here in Covington, you have a community restorative justice office who's very willing to have these kinds of dialogues, and to have, to work and work through issues of conflict, of how things, what has happened, who has been harmed, what obligation did it create, and how do we repair it? And you have the opportunity to choose something different and to choose a way forward. And so, I guess in closing, because I think we are, we I got 3 or 4 minutes, Susan tells me, so I'm certainly going to take them, as you can imagine. Is that in our country, I'll close with this. In our country, we must consider new narratives that are braver, that they're more honest, and that they deconstruct some antiquated ways of vertical justice and antiquated systems. Narratives that allow us to tell stories. Stories that we can personally participate in and not have others representing perhaps perceptions. Where one person is the good guy, the other person is the bad guy or gal. And where one is wrong, the other is right. Where we are concerned more with winning and losing a battle than sometimes we are with really solving what are these underlying issues that have caused where we are and why are we here. Many times the needs and the feelings of victims are ignored. And is that really justice? Can we do that? People leave institutions sometimes feeling empty, whatever the institution, not all criminal justice, but they feel confused and sometimes they're rarely satisfied. Dr. Robert Yazzie of the Navajo Nation Supreme Court shares some brilliant thoughts, I think, in a New Mexico Law Review, or journal article that I read in 1994. And I think it's so relevant today, regardless of the time. But, you know, he says that when we have money for justice, when it takes money for justice, then it becomes a commodity. Something to think about. In transformational justice and restorative practice, no person is really above one or the other. No person has any hierarchy over another, or more important than another, has more money than another, has more status than another. No person is above another. The circle processes we use and the conferencing processes of convening people together to have meaningful conversations and dialogue has no right or left. The circle doesn't have any right or left. No up or down. No beginning or an end. And every point on the line looks to the same center as the focus, as its focus. It is a symbol of oneness, wholeness, and unity. We gather together to talk, to discover, to share, and to heal. And if we say life comes from it, then we must say there must be healing. Today we take our steps to convene and talk, to discuss and to face our own and collective narratives about trauma and healing and how we move closer to a more transformative path. We move forward and toward brave choices, release antiquated ideologies that serve us no more. We create spaces for safe conversations, for stories, for healing, and for reconciliation. And with each other and in the pursuit of real justice. One that not only examines the path and the spot behind you, or where it happened, but it also sees the path ahead. And I guess I'll leave you in saying, I want you to think about those things today. And today you have an opportunity to be with Pam Mullins and Susie Bookster and Keith Hickman, who have been have committed a portion of their lives to rebuilding and repairing and restoring and having, more meaningful conversations about trauma and events of discrimination and inequality and injustice in our life. And I hope you'll take advantage of that. Share your stories. Talk about the tough things. Don't throw any softballs. Throw us some fast pitches. We like that. We like that. So I would say, just as a spiritual thought to leave you with from Deepak Chopra, is that we should remember that when many candles are lit, it still comes from the light of one candle. The flame is still lit from the light of one candle. And when you are whole, you are healed. So thank you so much for letting me share this work and our work with you all today.
This is a place where I came to find out about social justice, restorative justice. Restorative justice that I knew occurred about 1988 in San Diego, California. And it had to do with a young man who came to my church and did some rough things to my church. Well, we decided that we better go do a little bit of restorative justice, and got in touch with him and brought him over to the church, and we talked about the things that he did, and he agreed with us that he should do for us those things that he did wrong. And oh, I was happy. I was just joyously happy that here we are, making the world a better place. And this young man, though he did not become a member of our church, he became a friend of our church. He was a person who did not want to mess us up as he had. And I come here. Did I hear anything about a single individual having done something to a church community or a group? I heard about all kinds of wonderful things. I heard about a whole society who's now transferred a lot of this work to schools and the individuals within schools and to certain penal institutions. What I find fascinating is we're asking you to define what it really means to you, and for you to take action in your communities, in your family units, among your friends, to bring about restorative justice. Because I saw restorative justice when that young man said, "Oh, thank you very much." He was so happy that he didn't have to walk around thinking, "Oh, I did this bad thing and they're going to find out about it and I'm going to..." No, it was a piece of joy. And I'm praying that all of us working in this world of restorative justice can find the joy that that young man in my church found when we had our conversation and said, "Yeah, this is right." Makes the world a better place, do you think?
Yes, sir.
Good. The thing we're going to play for you now speaks to the issue of we kind of know what we want to do, but let's go find out how to do it. It's called Akiwawa. Did you think I forgot it? Thank you. And Akiwawa is the means by which the gentleman, in this case Baba Alatunji, went to a train station and said to the train master, "Take me home." And we're going to take you home. But we're going to remember, I hope you will remember, that you are on a journey to find those elements that allow you to practice restorative justice in your personal lives and bring joy and satisfaction to all of us. So here we go. I'll start. And you guys are going to play. And we're going to play slowly at first because it's like a train getting started. What do you think about that? And we're going to speed up. We're going to have fun, and we hope that the audience takes a true desire to find that thing that makes restorative justice a joy in our lives and in our world. I'll start us. Say it. Say it. No.
Thank you, go forth, restore and heal.
I know.
You wanted to keep going.
I did. I was just warming this thing up. It was feeling good to me. Thank you, Pamela. We decided to come together as a group almost 10 years ago. And it was under the guidance of a guy named Ed Beatty. And right now, the newest guy in our group is Reese. He doesn't even have a drumming name. He hasn't developed that far. Well, I'm an older guy in the group. We've been practicing drumming about 10 years, 12 years, and it is truly an energetic joy. So what happens is you start playing, and two things that I'll mention happen. You get your body warm, you get yourself physically excited, and you just want to feel good and continue feeling even better by playing more and more and more. So I said three things, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Brian. The drum that I play is called a djembe. It was started in Africa, and it was used to communicate group to group. So if I'm a king and I'm on a journey from village to village, as I approach that village, I play this drum. And it's shaped like this because, as you know, most drums are shaped straight or just a bow down like so. But this drum is loud. It has long range. It goes very far. And if I am a king headed toward a new village, I'm playing my drum and they will answer me. Yes, you're welcome to my village. So please continue coming. And by the time they get there, they're met with a circle of people playing drums, and they have a spirit right there, a joy. And people are dancing and playing drums and welcoming each other, and that's to us what the djembe drum is. It's made of normally a wooden frame, a goatskin head, and it's generally tied with ropes. These are innovations, these keys to make tuning the drum easier.